Hello, you are listening to the first episode of Mini Meow-Ments, an Animal Humane New Mexico podcast. June is National Adopt a Shelter Cat Month, so throughout the month of June, we will be speaking with the ex-purr-ts on all things feline. I'm Brandon Carter, Animal Humane's multimedia specialist. Today's episode, Enrichment, Mews, and kitty cues. I sat down with our cat programs manager, Adrianne, to talk feline enrichment.
My name is Adrianne Lamison. I'm the cat programs manager here at Animal Humane New Mexico. I've worked in sheltering for about 9 years now, and I really started working more exclusively with cats after I did a apprenticeship at Awesome Pets Alive and started up our working cat program. So that was kind of my start into cat behavior.
Right on. Do you have any cats of your own at home?
Of course. Yes, I have 3 cats. I have Kaiju, he's a Maine Coon. I have Fry, who is a foster failure, and I have Randy, who is a blind cat and also a foster failure.
Right on. And Kaiju is an amazing name for a Maine Coon.
Thank you. Thank you. I chose it because he was a big boy.
So what are some common misconceptions about cat behavior?
I think like the biggest misconception is that, we'll hear people say that cats are jerks or, that they are aloof and they're not friendly. And I think that's just very much not true. A lot of times we are setting unreasonable expectations on cats. We have to realize they're not dogs. They're completely separate species and they don't have the same inclinations that dogs do. That's not meaning to say that some cats aren't going to be as friendly as a dog, but sometimes cats are communicating that they're done with an interaction or, that they don't want to interact at that point, and we're not listening to those cues. So that's when we see behaviors crop up, is when we're not listening to cats' clear communications and giving them the space that they need.
So what are best practices for that, for reading cat's body language?
So just like from a layman's standpoint, I would say the most important one to learn as kind of a beginner into cat behavior is the tail. So always watch your cat's tail. A happy tail is going to be kind of really that loose candy cane or question mark shape, and that's always a sign of a really healthy, confident cat. When a cat starts to get overstimulated or they start to be done with an interaction, you will start to see that tail twitch. Cats have incredibly sensitive touch receptors all over their body, which I don't think people realize as much, more than people, more than dogs, and they have 2 types of touch receptors. One is slowly adapting and one is rapidly adapting. So rapidly adapting touch receptors respond to the displacement of hair and the touch on the skin in the moment it occurs, and that's just them letting them know, like, hey, touch is happening. What's different about cats than some other species is they have really sensitive, slowly adapting receptors that continue to fire the entire time that that interaction is happening. So if you can imagine a cat who's a little bit more sensitive to touch, they're just getting that touch over and over again, and their adapters are just continuing to fire. That's incredibly overstimulating to them.
So for a cat that you don't necessarily know all that well, what would you recommend for how to approach them, how to get to know them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Allowing the cat to consent to that interaction is really, really important. So giving them the space to make that first interaction so you can offer yourself up, be very non-threatening, turning your body to the side and always allowing them an exit. So if a cat is in a corner, making sure that they have that exit that they need. And you can always present your hand down low in a very non-threatening gesture. If they choose to come forward and engage, I always recommend just primarily petting on the scent receptors on the face and along that jawline. Cats don't have very much touch sensitivity on their face, so they actually like being pet there. It helps that you smell like them, and that's where they just really want to be pet. So using that jawline, and then as the cat kind of comes forward and continues to want that, you can try different parts of the body. But if the cat doesn't come forward and doesn't want that, then just leave them alone.
Is cat behavior different in the shelter environment versus the home environment?
Yeah, absolutely. There's 2 major things about cats. One is similar to all animals in a shelter environment, is that anybody when threatened is going to have 3 major responses, and that is fight, freeze, and flight. And that's the same with people too. That's why some of us feel such anxiety in situations. With cats in a shelter environment, we're taking away their ability to flee. So they only have fight or freeze. So a lot of cats will just shut down and kind of process on their own time. But some cats, when you take away that ability to flee, they're going to turn and they're going to fight. So they're going to act much more big and scary than they are normally. Also, cats are very territorial based. So if you take away their territory and the place that they're comfortable in, we do see a lack of confidence come from that because they have to completely readjust.
So shifting gears here,
Yeah.
dog training is really common, but cat training less so.
Yeah.
How do you train a cat?
You train a cat just like you train anything else. Really, there's been a lot of scientific studies about how people and animals learn, and positive reinforcement training is kind of the gold standard. That is how cats learn. Cats are not punishment-based at all. You cannot punish a cat and have them learn from that. It's just not how their brains work. Utilizing positive reinforcement training is really, really good. Basically rewarding them for the behaviors that you want to see and then ignoring the behaviors that you don't like. I really like clicker training. I usually use a yes cue instead of a clicker because cats are very noise sensitive. But if you charge your yes cue and you associate that with a treat, you can actually use that to mold and shape behaviors with cats. My favorite is teaching them touch as a first one.
What can you train a cat to do?
You can basically train them to do anything. It just depends on your specific cat, how they're motivated, and how much they enjoy training. Obviously, every pet is going to be different. Certain cats are not going to enjoy training as other cats, so maybe not every cat can do everything. But if you get a cat who's really into learning, you can basically train them to do anything that you want. Obviously, like when we see cats on TV or in a movie, those are all cats that have been trained using these methods. So the world is your oyster with that. It's just kind of trying to figure out. Like I mentioned before, touch training is my favorite because it's a really good lead into a lot of behaviors. So once you teach them to touch their nose to something, you can teach them to go out on a cue and go to a mark. You can teach them to get onto a scale for a vet appointment. There's just so many things that you can use after training that first basic behavior.
Would you consider training a form of pet enrichment?
Yeah, definitely.
So could you tell us a little bit about what is pet enrichment and specifically what is feline enrichment?
Enrichment essentially is just a creative outlet for pets to have physical or mental stimulation. For animals in particular, so in zoos and in shelters, we do try to use it to have animals exhibit species typical behaviors. So with cats in particular, hunting is a very big one, so making sure to do daily play. Also making sure we're taking advantage of feeding times as a source of enrichment as well. So using puzzle toys for cats is actually something that's becoming more and more common. A big one is having them search for things using their paws, because a mouse goes into a hole, a cat's going to try to get that out. So using that thing that occurs in the wild and having them do that during dinner time is really, really great.
So what is the benefit of feline enrichment in the shelter environment?
A lot of times animals do not express species typical behaviors in a place where they feel a little bit more threatened or uncomfortable. So it's really allowing them the access to have that. In a home, they have a whole house that they can explore and kind of get into trouble in if they want to. But here they have much more limited space and that freedom of choice is taken away from them. So allowing them to have freedom of choice, allowing them to have an opportunity to explore things and use their brains and use their, have that physical outlet is really, really important. If you see genetically how much dogs have changed over the years, there's been so much genetic diversity from what they started out as. Cats have had very little genetic diversity and change, so they're actually still very, very close to their wild counterparts, which is why we see cats revert to a feral state if, people have not been in the picture for, a generation or two, as opposed to dogs where it takes many more generations for that to happen. So feral cats are a really good way to look at what behavior a cat would naturally express. Feral cats spend about 15% of their day hunting, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider that cats only sleep about 70% of their day, the cat still needs that in a home. That doesn't just go away now that they have a home. A lot of cats still need that physical and mental enrichment every day that they would in the wild. So if you start that right from the shelter into the home, there's no negative side effects for that.
Can you list and explain a few different types of feline enrichment that you provide here at Animal Humane?
We do obviously provide toys. We always make sure that they have different types of toys. So usually we'll try to get a soft toy, a hard toy, make sure they're different shapes and they serve different purposes so that cats can choose what kind of toy they want to interact with. Toys are enrichment. So that would be worldwide the most common. I would think that as things are kind of going, we are seeing a little bit of a movement towards people being more involved. So we are seeing an uptick in using puzzle toys and using food as enrichment as well.
And how can you tell if a cat is responsive to that enrichment? And how should you change your approach if they are not enjoying it?
Starting slow is always really good. Some cats are motivated differently. There are 3 major ways that cats are motivated. One is physical touch from their people, one is going to be play, and one is going to be food. So finding out what your cat is motivated by. So some cats are not going to be motivated by food, and sometimes they are, but you just really have to find what they like. So it does take some experimenting. I always call it making a cat charcuterie board, where you offer them a bunch of different things and you see what they go for the most, and then using that specifically for training, so they only get that special treat during training time. So there's just like so much that you can try, but it does boil down to your individual cat. Since I've come on as the cat programs manager, my favorite thing is the actual training of the cats. I don't think it was really something that has been done recently in shelters, and is becoming more on the forefront, but actually taking these cats who suffer from overstimulation and frustration in a shelter environment and being able to provide them with that mental enrichment in a different way is really, really important. And it's super fun. It's really fun to show off, like, hey, this cat can do what your dog can do. It's something that you can show their adopters when they're interested. It gives them something else to focus on. And it's something that the adopters can continue in the home, and I think it's really fun.
Any other fun facts about feline enrichment and training that we might have missed or not covered here?
I think maybe my favorite fact about cats, and I think it always surprises people, and it also, really ties into behavior and what we see from them, is that cats have only been really inside pets for 70 years, which, maybe sounds like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things and our relationship with them, that's not very long. So, I think about like my grandparents, and like they just wouldn't have had inside cats because it wasn't a possibility until 70 years ago, because the kitty litter was invented. With that invention, it allowed us to have cats as exclusively indoor cats, which is great because it increases their lifespan. It's much safer for them. But I think it's always good to think about the repercussions that also has. So cats get an incredible amount of stimulation from the outside environment. There's a lot of things to smell, there's birds to watch, there's bugs to chase, there's things that they can do all day. And when you're taking them into an indoor environment, you're really limiting that. So making sure you're thinking about that in terms of your cat, like providing them with bird feeders at windows to look out, and building a catio, a safe outdoor enclosed space where cats can still get that outside stimulation but safely, is really important. And we see a lot of behavior issues kind of go away as people are kind of taking the outside and bringing it inside.
The most important question, final question.
Yeah.
If you were a cat, what would your meow sound like?
I think I would be like a really raspy cat. So I'd be like, nah. Yeah.
A huge thank you to Adrianne for giving us her time and ex-purr-ts. And thank you so much for tuning in to Mini Meow-Ments, an Animal Humane New Mexico podcast. As a reminder, June is National Adopt a Shelter Cat Month. If you're feline like opening your hearts and your homes to homeless cats, meow is the time. If adopting a cat isn't in the cards, consider volunteering, fostering, or supporting a local animal shelter like Animal Humane New Mexico. Information on how to get involved is on our website, animalhumanenm.org.